joke.
I love joke.
Joke is good.
Joke is good.
funny.
Joke. We like joke.
Funny.
Joke make me
Funny.
Joke.
Joke. Sound check.
Sound
laugh.
check.
Sound check. We're checking the sound. And then we're actually going to check the sound because we don't usually do that.
Nope. It's good
Yeah,
practice.
it's probably a good idea.
Why do we start so many of our cold opens with just random songs?
Because
It's been a while since we've done that, though, I think.
But it's something I think if we went through our old episodes and looked at exactly
We did a lot more.
how many of our cold opens are just random songs, I think that would take them like the largest number.
The last 10 have been me starting off by saying, so this happened. But now we're getting back to our roots.
Well, that's because
Of
Riley's
just-
here again.
Well,
still.
'cause we're all in person again.
And
Doop-de-doop.
I think part of it is we're just making noise to check the sound and when you do bop to skibbity boo bop dops in with musical ish people, it eventually will turn into music, and then we all pick up on what song each other are doing.
What was
and
that
break
song
into
we were
unison.
doing? I was just sort of...
That was the Papyrus Hangout theme
yeah.
from Undertale by Toby Fox.
Dating Fight, I believe, is the title of that one.
Right.
Because that's when you get into the very intense portion
The relationship
of trying
simulator.
to out friendship each other.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff.
Indeed. That was a different episode, though.
That
Yes.
was.
Go back and
That was
listen
a
to
while
it.
ago now.
That was. It doesn't
That-
seem like it, but that was like...
At least several months. Like 3 months, I think.
Yeah, that had to have been like end of 2020.
Because I was playing it over Christmas break.
Yeah.
But I finished it like just after I got back to seminary.
So maybe it was like early January.
or mid-January, something like that.
And now it's... Well, when this episode goes up, it will be April.
It will be, won't it?
How do the time fly?
After this episode goes up, it will be the Easter season.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
You can say the A word again, but we're still in Lent, so we're not going to say it this week.
We have to be naughty as musicians when we practice.
I feel like that's a slightly different context. It's not like
It
you're...
is, but I usually for funnies will just stay like ha hey hoo ha or something like that.
They're distinct.
Hey hoo ha, ha hey hoo ha, ha hey hoo ha.
They're distinct syllables. I am not breaking the law.
I'm a legalist a bit. Maybe
It's valid. Altogether valid.
We had a when I was younger, we had a black lab. Her name was, we called her Hallie, short for the Forbidden Lent word. And there was kind of a joke between mom and dad. It's like, maybe we could get a dispensation if we need to yell at her during Lent. Or it was like, either that or the joke was they were trying to avoid swearing at the dog by replacing her name with something that draws attention to God.
I love it. Like reverse psychologizing yourself. Or that, yeah, whatever.
But then she jumped on Isaac, and that was a big no-no, so we gave her to an aunt.
Yep. I can see that being an issue, yeah.
Being Isaac was the very tiny and meek kid that he was. So.
It took me being bigger than most dogs to get comfortable around dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Because we didn't own one, and people kept trying to leave them at our house because it was a house with a lot of kids. Oh, they'll love a dog.
They wouldn't be able to tell.
No.
If something poops on the floor, it could be a kid, it could be a dog. Nobody knows.
Yeah. And there was a particular dog we called Bear, which mom and dad shouldn't have let us name it because that was
Once you name it, you start getting attached to it.
Yes, it's not like with the pig thing. Like I've heard farming. That's not where this story's going. But we had it for a little bit, and then my dad did a little bit of research, and he's like, "Oh, this is going to be one of the big dog breeds, like ridiculously big, like Saint Bernard big.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a Saint Bernard, but it was kind of a similar. It might have been like a Pyrenees or something like that. Or no, those are the white ones, aren't they? Anyway, regardless, it was going to be a big honking boy. So we're like, okay, we have to feed 7 kids. We are not also going to feed a dog the size of 7 kids while we're at it. So
it'd be a great big woofer.
yes, it would have been a
heckin' boofer, in fact.
Yes, it would have been awesome, but not economical. So we had to find that dog a new family. But it was fun while it lasted. And then until my older brother Adam got a dog, and well, after several. Anyway, until he got a dog, now Aspen is the family dog, and she's a good girl.
Mm.
Kind of spoiled, but yeah.
See, I never had any like discomfort around dogs, even when I was a kid, despite not having a dog. Nor did any of our family friends have dogs.
Mm-hmm.
I just like had this instinctive trust of the heckin' good boys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there would be the neighbors' dogs would run into our yard and like try to tackle us a bunch because they had like a really high-strung retriever.
Mm.
And there was one neighbor who had a good shepherd that was a little too or not good shepherd. German. It's that time of year, guys. They had a German shepherd that was a little aggressive. So I guess that's where it came from for me. So, and those were big dogs. No, it was a Great Dane. Pardon me. It was a Great Dane. So even bigger.
Right.
We have a German shepherd named Lexi at the seminary, short for Lexi O Divina.
Oh, Divina.
I love it. Seminary puns. I love it.
Good. That's
Father
good.
Christian's doggo.
I haven't met Basil yet, Father Meyer's dog, but he looks like a good boy.
There was a couple.
I've met the doggo. I've never pet the doggo, which is a great shame.
Yeah, it's like there was Father Cheney decided to do one of his impromptu Facebook lives while he was at the UND Newman Center for something. And Basil was just lying on the floor waiting for a belly rub, and Father wasn't giving it to him. And he was just waiting and waiting. Father wasn't taking the hint, and he's just like, okay.
Father, pet the dang dog.
Pet the dog.
Pet the heckin' woofer.
Pet him. But he looks like
a good boy Borker.
I want a dog someday, but I feel like I'm going to want a place with a yard first.
Right. There's not a lot of yard in town in Fargo, so.
Yeah.
Well, there is, just not in this part of town.
Not this part of town, sure.
The type of dog I would want wouldn't be good with an apartment, I feel like.
There are very few that are, and the ones that are good for an apartment are not ones that I would be terribly interested in ever having.
You're cute, but you're kind of lame. Let's be real. Lap dogs are.
And
if
also,
if you're going to get a dog that looks like a rodent, just get a rodent.
Yeah.
right.
Then you can keep it caged and you don't
I
have
don't
to take
want
it
to
on
get
runs.
like a pug because they always look like they're in great pain.
Because they are in great pain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Actually.
When they get older, they get like arthritic, don't they? Or
Well, yeah, this is like, imagine you with all of that face scrunched up into one spot.
yeah.
like when I wake up in the morning, but all the time.
But all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, same thing with bulldogs. And this is like, I don't know.
Pugs, I used to.
Keep your bulldogs and your pugs, folks, but stop breeding them and stop buying them.
Yeah. Get a pit bull instead. Like,
As long as you train it well.
yeah, apparently, like, if they aren't abused, they're actually kind of nice.
I think that's a lot of animals.
Yeah.
Yeah, but pit bulls will revert to their nature
Right.
if you don't.
They were bred to be
nurture.
fighting dogs, after all. Hence, pit bull for the
But
dog fighting
they're
pit.
heckin' good doggos if you treat them right. So.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But yeah, someday I'd like to get a dog. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm not so much a retriever person, although they are good boys. I wouldn't say no to one, but I'm more of a lab guy, I think.
3 out of the 4 dogs I had growing up were labs. No, 2 out of the 3. Why did I say 3 out of the 4? We didn't have 4 dogs. The earliest one.
4 dog night.
Right. Well, so the first one we had was, his name was Buddy. He was like half retriever, half lab, I think, or no, half collie, half lab, something along those lines.
Sure.
He was a floofer.
Mm-hmm.
Then dogs get old and die and do that whole thing.
Mm-hmm. They go to the farm, but
they-
we live on a farm.
Actually,
well,
no, it was actually kind of like, yeah, he got a face full of porcupine, then ran off another time and didn't come back because then we had Hallie, then we had Geddy Lee.
Oh yeah,
who was
the one that Andrew named.
It was the one that Andrew named because that is the bassist and lead singer for Rush, and he is kind of a legend.
Mm-hmm. Good day.
Right? But no, he showed up like in our yard one hunting season. We saw him and two of his sisters carrying the deer head away. And it was they just hung out in our yard for like a week or two. And it was funny to watch them interact because the two girls were like all energetic and frisky and getting on each other and climbing on him. But then like
he was just the chill boy.
He was just in the middle, just being chill, and he would just stand up and they'd fall off of him and he'd walk away. So we took the other two to a shelter and kept Geddy. And he stuck around for a solid year.
Let's take the chill one.
We didn't do any like major vet visits to get him affixed or anything like that. So he had a tendency to want to run away. Mm-hmm. So then like about a year later, he decided it was time to run away and not come back, which was not the worst thing, I suppose.
Yeah,
it just kind of happened. Which was before Simon was born, and then Mom immediately after we discovered Mom was pregnant with Simon. So it's like, maybe not having a dog and a baby in the same.
This
house.
is back when they lived in the woods. So
yeah, we lived in the middle
dogs,
of the woods. So
dogs running around.
Dogs showing up, llamas showing up. It was a whole thing.
It's a freaking llama.
Yeah, we were homeschooled, right? So we're in the living room taking standardized tests and stuff, and then Andrew comes down. It's like, hey, Mom, there's a thing in our yard.
I can imagine your mom just be like, "Well, great, that's specific. I can't. There's any number of things that could be in our yard."
So yeah, they're in addition to because we're in the woods, there was just other nature that would swing by our yard from time to time.
Yeah,
from ducks to deer to cranes to whatever. It was a good place to
after
live.
Hurricane Katrina, I think it was, there was a random tropical bird that showed up in our yard, and we lived many, 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 many miles away from Louisiana, obviously, but sometimes birds get sucked up into wind and then they land in random places.
Or
and
are they truly random places, or were they put there to keep an eye on you?
It was a pretty bird, but it died right after that, so maybe not.
Yeah, that particular drone was just not well
suited
for those climactic conditions.
Yeah, it was too far. It hadn't had a recharging on a power line recently, so it's...
Well, they're built for different weather, right?
Yeah.
They're built for different,
probably wasn't
navigating different environments.
Yeah, probably wasn't cold weather proofed. Shouldn't have got past inspection, but... Neither should we. We're the Palladium Papists. I'm James.
I'm Nathan.
And I'm Riley.
Speaking of dead.
We're going to fulfill a request today?
Yes.
We are fulfilling a request today.
So we're going to get a little philosophical?
We are getting a little philosophical.
In a world where one man will decide whether to pull a lever and kill one man, or not pull a lever and allow 5 people to die. Find out in Philosophical.
Philosophical is a part of the show where we get philosophical about films. What is the film this week?
The film this week is Corpse Bride by Tim Burton. It was released in 2005.
Is this before or after Nightmare Before Christmas?
After. Long after.
Okay. That would have been late
Christmas
90s.
Like early 90s, I thought.
Oh, okay.
Something crazy early, like 93.
I feel like in between there we had James and the Giant Peach. And
there were several films. Nightmare Before Christmas was one of his earlier ones. Corpse Bride was towards the later end of his filmography, but yeah.
Well, stop motion animated anyway.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You don't see too many of those these days.
Oh no, you see them here and there.
Here and there,
and we've done most of
good many of them. Yeah,
on this show.
Yeah. I'll have to watch
Stop motion
Kubo
or Tim
at some
Burton?
point.
Stop motion.
Stop motion.
Okay.
We'll have to watch Kubo at some point, but
Kubo's
anyway.
pretty good. And I've also been interested in Coraline, but
Coraline's good. I like Coraline.
Was 9 stop motion or is that 3D animated?
9 was 3D, I believe.
Okay. It looks, yeah.
Nine's a good food too. Has Elijah Wood in it.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, we're talking about
We're not talking about those movies
Corpse
yet.
Bride.
We're talking about Corpse Bride.
Squirrel.
So Corpse Bride is set in this kind of, I don't know, late Victorian England, I guess. It's supposed to like represent that. That's the sort of aesthetic that's going on.
It's very
Not
black.
terribly specific. Doesn't
Not
tie a
ter-
date to
yeah.
itself or anything.
It doesn't actually say that, but that's
No.
kind of just the background,
The
aesthetic
vibe.
that's going on.
Yeah.
And so we have at the beginning of the film these two families who are arranging a marriage between their children for sort of social standing and monetary purposes, as one does.
If you don't marry, we'll be destitute. That's the one line I remember.
Of all the lines that there were to remember. Oh, I had one that I was when I was watching it earlier today, as I did,
Yeah.
that I just totally have forgotten. Maybe I'll come across
What's
it.
okay? What are the names of the two main characters? Or well, the main character
The
again.
main character, voiced by Johnny Depp, his name is Victor,
Yes.
and
His bride to be.
his bride to be is Victoria.
Victor and Victoria.
I see.
As
So definitely not a sleight of hand reference to Victorian England. Whatsoever.
definitely not at all.
No.
And
Well,
so
this is vaguely Victorian. What should we call the characters? How about Victor and Victoria? You know what? I like your style.
And the setting, like the background, all of the colors of everything, everyone is all just like gray.
Kind of, yeah, very gray, kind of muted blues.
It's not even brown.
Yeah. it's-
No.
I don't know. The color list doesn't even begin to describe it. It's almost like it's a black and white film.
Almost.
Almost. Like there's
But it's a little
hints-
too dirty to
Yeah.
be pure black and white. Cause,
right.
yeah.
Anyway, so that's kind of the aesthetic of the world they're living in, and kind of, and that kind of just represents the attitude of everyone around.
Everything sucks.
It's all very humdrum, and we are sad, and we hate our wives
And our lives.
and our lives and everything. But anyway,
Yeah.
so
Marriage is purely for convenience and practical purposes.
yeah, so they're Victoria is like talking with her parents, and he's like, "Don't you love each other?" They're like, Psh, "Of course not."
Mm-hmm.
It's like they outright vocally hate each other, but it's just like, you know, marriage is just a
This is
thing
our
you-
contract. This
It's
is
a
our
formality.
agreement.
It's a piece of paper.
Mm-hmm. And she's like, that's not very satisfying, though. Because they've never even met each other, Victor and Victoria, to this point. They're just like, I've never met the lady. I have no idea if I like her or not.
You can't have any premarital eye contact.
They do kind of have that attitude, but we'll get there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the families meet up to have tea the night before,
And discuss the plans, do the rehearsal.
all that jazz. And Victor sneaks off to play the piano to display the fact that he is a whimsical, artsy dude and isn't so much in this stuffy, stuck-up, asocial kind of thing. Well, it's not really asocial, but it's like, I hate the world and everything.
Mhm.
Hate my wife, hate my life.
Superficial.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes and plays the piano to demonstrate his not-like-themness.
Mm-hmm.
And Victoria...
And he's a good pianist.
He's a talented pianist. He does some nice stop motion piano playing.
Mhm.
That's fairly accurate, actually,
Yeah.
to what the notes that are coming out of the
Which
keyboard are.
kudos.
Kudos.
Yeah.
And Victoria hears this and goes, "Ooh, a whimsical, not like the other girls boy."
I'm not like other girls. I'm a boy.
Who plays piano.
And so she kind of waltzes down the stairs and says, is just like kind of stands there and listens to him for a while, and he
Well,
notices
that's very
her.
nice. I've never been allowed to touch the piano.
And he's like, "Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. So sorry.
It's like, no. I think it's cool.
But I like it." And then he's like, "I've just been very improper by playing a musical instrument. This was probably just here for decoration."
I mean, it's a very well-tuned piano for all that.
Well, you gotta keep up appearances.
True.
Mm-hmm. And so later that night, they're like doing the rehearsal and whatnot, and Victor keeps stumbling over his vows, and he just can't seem to remember the lines right.
I just can't get my vowels right.
And Bishop Christopher Lee says, "Boy, you must come back later.
And do it right.
Do it right. And so, of course, being the emo man that he is, he goes off into the woods.
That being Johnny Depp's character.
Being Johnny Depp's character.
Not
Bishop Christopher Lee.
Christopher
Yeah.
Lee.
He goes off into the woods.
The
and
late Bishop Christopher Lee.
The late. May he rest in peace.
Mm-hmm.
So Victor goes off into the woods, clumsily reciting his lines, trying to get them right, but he just can't seem to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he finds this little grove in the middle of the woods, and he I got it. He's just
in the groove now. He's shaking all the trees' hands, saying, "Hey, good to meet you, father of the bride." Doing all the stuff.
Call
and
me
then,
Dad, if you insist.
Mm-hmm.
then he does the
Never called anyone
whole
father before.
wedding vows speech, flawlessly, and just I don't know, just kind of he's in the middle of his whimsical fantasy rehearsal thing, and sticks the ring on what he thinks is a tree branch or root, but it actually turns out to be a skeletal arm poking up out of the ground.
Gasp.
Gasp! It's not we didn't see this coming.
This is
because
where
it's
things get
not a
weird.
movie
We
called
didn't.
The
It's not the
Corpse
movie called
Bride.
Corpse Bride or anything.
Oh, this must be the corpse.
And so he yanks the arm off of the skeletal lady, and the skeletal lady crawls out of the ground and starts running after him. And he eventually gets pulled down into the land of the dead, more or less.
But he's not quite dead.
But he's not quite dead. And all of the folks in the underground oh, we've got a new arrival, and they have a nice skeletal jazz number
in a bar, of course.
in a bar, and
In like a neon green and blue bar.
yeah,
Like the
it's
whole-
all kinds of funky colors,
jazz
down there.
music.
And yeah, so they're just kind of celebrating his arrival, and that the corpse bride is now married, because she was all sad that the person that she was gonna marry kind of
Ghosted her. one
ghosted
might
her.
say.
In fact,
in more ways than one, you
in
could
more
say.
Yes.
ways than one.
And she wandered off into the woods and got murdered. And that's where she ended up, where Victor found her.
Right.
Right.
And so Victor at this point is kind of,
Ah, crap. I didn't mean to marry you, but we're married now.
I
Don't
didn't
you
want
like
to
me?
marry you. I need to go home. Let me go home.
Mm-hmm.
And so he tries to run away and escape, but of course you can't go from the land of the dead to the land of the living
So
so
easily.
easily. And so he's just trying to figure out a way to go back, and he kind of hatches up a little scheme that he and Emily, as her name is,
The Corpse Bride.
her name is just Emily. He says, I think we should meet my parents.
Mhm.
Let's go meet my parents. They won't be frightened by you or anything.
Yeah.
No, this is a perfectly good and logical course of action.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, great, let's do it. I'd love to meet your parents. So they go talk to the
Oh,
elder,
he's warming up to me.
the elder skeleton, and get a spell to go back to the land of the living. And Victor's like, all right, sit here. Don't move. I'm going to go get them. Of course, not having any intention of coming back. He just plans to leave her there. So he goes and sneaks his way up to Victoria's room. And she's like, oh no, I've been so worried about you. And he's like, yes,
I thought you ran away.
but I'm
doesn't
here
quite sound like that.
now. Everything is fine now. Except then Emily comes crawling up
knew
the,
it.
the
There's
side
another
of the
woman.
house. I knew it. There's another woman here, and now I'm sad.
Time to go back to dead.
Time to be dead again. You are coming with me. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And they go back to the land of the dead and be sad.
And Victoria is just kind of shocked and scared
Wants to help
because-
Victor.
But her parents think she's crazy.
because, of course, it sounds crazy that a
Well, it's
corpse
pretty
and a
clear that
guy-
this dude just ran off on you, so I guess there won't be a wedding. Oh, wait. There's this other dude who just showed up.
Who showed up the day before, incidentally.
Yeah.
Right, just at the
Why
rehearsal.
don't you, how about I marry her? Like, okay, he looks rich. Let's have him marry her.
Because if you don't wed, we'll be destitute.
Anyway, where were we?
Line has been stuck in my head for months.
Why that line?
I
of all the
don't know. I
lines?
think it's the way he pronounced it.
Interesting.
So Barkus, the usurper dude, I guess, the guy who's gonna marry Victoria now, is planning their wedding and all that jazz.
He's a little sketch.
He is very sketch,
A little sus.
little sus. And so back in the land of the dead, Emily is very mopey that she was under the impression that Victor was kind of sort of warming up to her. Now it's clear that he's not, and he really doesn't want to be there.
Yes, I'll
He's
never
like,
find love.
I would never marry you. And then she's like super depressed and has to do a musical number about it, of course.
As you do when you're depressed in a musical.
In a Tim Burton musical.
Well, in musicals
Any
in
old
general.
musical, really.
True.
That's how musicals do storytelling, is through the music. That's why they're called musicals.
So if you see someone singing, they might need help.
Right, but you don't acknowledge it if you exist in the universe of a
So
musical.
a musical number occurs in like this finite space. There's like a time bubble that surrounds the characters in the number, so that the events of it are not visible to anyone else until its conclusion.
The mechanics of musical mental health notwithstanding. She's pretty sad.
She's pretty sad.
Imagine like a musical movie with like a therapy session, and the whole therapy session is a musical number.
Totally make it a thing.
Write that down. Might do that later.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Victor is at this point like, well, I guess I'm kind of stuck here. So maybe I should just be married to this
Here's
lady.
my dead dog.
The dead dog showed up a little while ago.
Yeah,
because
like,
they
right when he
need
got
a
there.
cute side character because movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So he's like, maybe I should make it up to her. So he goes and plays the piano a little bit because she's sitting there plonking on it, playing a sad little tune. And he's like, let's do some dueling piano, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So they play some piano, and she's
Quite
like
lovely.
still mad, but starting to be less mad, and
They get really into the
they go ham on the
duet.
piano.
and they're like, okay, they're sort of reconciled a little bit.
Sort of.
Yeah,
A little bit.
little
A bit. A bit.
And I'm not remembering the thing that happened.
Is it at this point that the
this flashback
his
to the
parents'
wedding plans?
driver dies?
Hmm?
Is it at this point where his parents' driver dies?
Yes. The carriage driver at this point, they're like running all around town. Victor's parents are trying to find him, and they're just like telling the carriage driver, stop coughing. But apparently he's having some deathly coughing illness and falls off the carriage and dies.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even notice. They just keep on going. But he shows up down in the land of the dead, and he's like, I'm okay with this.
Mm-hmm.
This is fine. I'm blue now.
Oh, hey, Victor, your lady's gonna marry a different girl.
A different
Lady-
dude.
Different dude.
Wait, right, crap.
You're married to the different. He's
Yeah,
married to the
she's
different
marrying
girl.
the sketchy dude.
Sketchy dude. Barkus.
Yes. My brain.
I was like, oh no, I've got to do something about this.
again. Well,
He's like, well, I guess we should, me and Emily get married properly.
mhm.
And then they're like,
He's like, yeah, because well, she's off with another guy. I guess I may as well, if I'm going to have love, I should marry the woman I have.
But then Elder Skeleton Man's like, oh, by the way, this kind of isn't valid
Unless
because
you're dead. And
she's dead and you're not dead. That's kind of how marriage works in this universe. You can't be a living person married to a dead person.
till
'cause
death do us
you
part. And death is happening now. So you are part.
Right. So in order to make this actually work, you both got to be dead
you have to kill yourself.
because suicide seems like a really good idea at this point.
During the wedding ceremony.
During the wedding,
And you
ceremony.
have to do it in the land of the living.
Yep.
right,
can't just do
because
it here.
You can't die in the dead world, I guess.
And Emily's like, no, I can't make him do that. Then he wouldn't be making that choice of his own volition, and I couldn't trick him into that. And he's like, listening through the door. He's like, it's okay. You don't have to. I'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then so they start making plans, and they teleport the whole skeletal town upstairs back to the land of the living. And all the townspeople are freaking out until they realize it's just their dead relatives.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have all sorts of charming reunions with people who are dead. And then they go to the church, and Bishop Christopher Lee says, "Go away." And then they're like, "Shh, we're in church."
Mm-hmm.
And then they're about to have the ceremony, and then Victoria walks in and kind of sneaks around to the side of the
She's
altar.
like, "You're going after another dude."
And
She already married the guy at this
Dang it, I'm
point.
doing it again. You're going after another woman.
man.
Person.
I'm so terribly sorry.
And he's about to drink the poisoned wine to finish it off, and Emily grabs the chalice and pulls it down. He's like, I can't make you do this. And he's like, "But why?" And then she like turns his head over to Victoria standing off to the side. He's like, "Oh!" And then Barkis walks in. He's like,
Nope.
"Give me my wife back."
Yep.
And then they have an extended fight where Victor has a fork and Barkis has a sword, and somehow manages to live through all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then
It
he's
is
like,
at the end of this fight revealed that Barkis was the guy that ghosted Emily in more than one sense of the word.
right.
And
And
also
murdered
was
her.
apparently did this as sort of a serial
Yes, and he was planning to do this to Emily too. Victoria.
Victoria. So, because like Emily recognizes him, like you, and all the dead people are like, "Let's get him. He's living. You can't do that." And then he accidentally, in sort of a bad guy monologue, takes a triumphant sip out of the chalice, and then, oh crap, he's dead. Like, well, okay, now we can get him. So all the dead people take him off to do something, even though he's already dead.
And then Victor and Victoria get married, and then Emily turns into butterflies, and the movie's over.
Oogway's away.
Oogways into butterflies instead of cherry blossoms or whatever.
Yeah. So that is the corpse bread.
That is the general premise of it.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a fairly short movie. It's only
It's like an hour?
77 minutes, I think.
Mm-hmm. A little over an hour, yeah, hour and 20 minutes.
Slightly
roughly.
more than an hour.
A bit.
A bit.
Okay.
So,
So,
this is a film we've done by request.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that I don't like it, but I have some question marks.
Yes.
Because, you know, good art says something. It communicates some idea, and it speaks to something true.
And it evokes a response.
It pursues what's ultimately the truth, you know, whether that's something that can express verbally or
We're talking
something
good
that
art here.
that can't. Right. I'm talking
Right.
about good art. And that's why, like, when I watch The Corpse Bride, you know, I see that Tim Burton's aware of all that. And he knows, like, this is kind of the paradigm of art to this point in history. But as we were discussing earlier today amongst ourselves, like, this film takes a very postmodern stance insofar as it, like, it subverts your expectations for there being a point. All of it is set up to make you think there's a point, and then it just doesn't make one. And it wants you to make your own point. You take away from it whatever you feel like taking from it. Like, I know James earlier was saying, like,
I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be rooting for here.
yeah, you
Right.
don't. I mean,
which girl do you want him to get with? Because they're both perfectly nice women, and it's just like one's dead and one's the one who made a promise to.
Mm-hmm.
so like,
Well,
what
because
is he trying to
didn't
say?
initially choose either of them. Because in Victoria's case, it was an arranged marriage, and then in Emily's case, he put a ring on her finger by accident and didn't choose either initially.
It was clear that he made some connection with Victoria
Yeah.
right off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
Whomst is to say whether that would have endured or did, because I guess they ended up getting married. But
Right. But, and then he eventually also connects with Emily later in the film.
I think one of the points it does really make, though, is that, you know, there's a certain amount of connection to the dead that you can't really have.
Mm-hmm.
No, the story is based on like this Russian Jewish folktale, and with mostly the same premise is like the guy proposes to a person he doesn't know is there, puts a ring on some log, and turns out it's a skeletal lady. But they rule that by investigating, kind of the law, that you can't actually do this because she's dead. So you can't be married to someone who's dead. And it only gets around to making that point like literally as the film is ending. You don't know for sure one way or the other until, the moment the film ends, pretty much.
I mean, because like for me, I was like, well, this isn't, she's dead, so this isn't a thing. But the film is like, oh, but what if it is? I was like, oh, come on, you know what the answer to this question is.
I mean, it really was about to be.
Yeah.
If they had wanted to, they could have done it.
Yeah.
I mean, there was always something in the back of your mind, like, she's dead. Like, you just
There's
can't
a
make
problem
this work.
here, and I feel like
That's difficult to overcome in any meaningful way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Slight suspension of my suspension of disbelief there.
Yeah. So, what are your guys' thoughts?
Oh, all right. I'm starting. Well, for the record, I am not the biggest Tim Burton fan, and that is not to say I don't think that there's nothing redeemable about any of his work or anything like that. His aesthetic I just find displeasing to me personally, and that is a preference of mine. Partially because of how much I hated James and the Giant Peach when I was little, and every Tim Burton movie is like that to
I
me.
wonder why James.
People are like, oh, you'll like this movie. Your name is James. And it's like, this is an awful movie. And
This
it still
is absolute nightmare fuel.
It is still nightmare fuel to this day. I watched it was on Netflix, so I watched like the first 10 minutes and I was like, yeah, no, I was totally right as a 5-year-old. Holy cow. Anyway, so it's not just childhood trauma, right? Like the aesthetic, I'm not a fan of like the goth, macabre, spooky, scary aesthetic generally.
Yeah,
that is something Tim Burton tends to lean very heavily into. And yeah, his general aesthetic to me is unpleasant.
Yeah, I'm not so put off by the Hot Topic like design aesthetic, but it's I can see where you would.
The Demon Children and Nightmare Before Christmas were the absolute worst. That ruined the movie for me.
But that's the point of them, to be weird and creepy.
It was too much anyway for me at the time.
So no.
But yeah, I'm not a fan of Tim Burton. However, I was able to look past that for this movie and just try to open my mind a bit and, appreciate it for what it is, right? Mm-hmm. So we'll get into some of the stuff with like the beauty and everything later, but like as a film, it is well made. And the story is intriguing and it is entertaining on a certain level that I was able to appreciate. That is my opinion of this movie.
Yeah. I enjoyed it also. It's not like a movie that I would have personally chosen to go out of my way to watch.
However, because we love our two fans.
Right. We had to get around to it at some point because
we
it
have
was
said
requested
for
of us.
the whole time we will do requests.
Not through official channels, through the emails and such. I think we should start rejecting requests that aren't put through official channels.
You've gotten two requests to not through official channels.
This is grandfathered in though, so like we weren't really emphasizing that until recently.
Right.
Anyhow,
but I don't know. I liked it. It's just I tend to agree that it's like there wasn't a whole lot it was trying to say or do. Mm-hmm. Now, there's only so much you can do in 90 minutes, but then again, 90 minutes is more than enough for the story. For this story, there's like
the movie had a conclusion without a real conclusion though. It's like everything
it concluded.
It concluded without a conclusion.
Right.
With film, we were talking about this earlier too. Like with film, with some films you can have ambiguous endings and have them be thought provoking, and then sort of be led down plausible paths. Right. Like that can be done well. Think like Interstellar. Is he in a dream or is he awake?
No, you're thinking of
Inception.
Interstellar is different.
Anyway,
or like the ending of of Batman: The Killing Joke. That comic has an ending that's like, oh, who won that argument?
Mm-hmm.
Who? So you can have these interesting, thought-provoking, open-ended ish endings, and the discussion of what you believe
And then-
happened at the end can be part of the point.
And the
this
opposite
one-
end of the spectrum is like where a movie and it concludes, but you're like, so what was the point? Like why?
I
What?
don't think that's the opposite end of the spectrum. The opposite end of the spectrum is where it over-explains today's moral in plain black and white terms, and that's, you know,
Well, or no, like this is one, like there's over explaining and then there's, you know, because like the middle would be like, you know, the Inception thing where the ambiguity has meaning.
oh sure.
And then so you have
There's over-explained. Then there's just like,
what did I just watch?
yeah,
And this movie kind of toes the line, leaning towards I'm not sure what I'm supposed to make of this
right.
kind of
And
territory.
as far as I can tell, that's intentional by Burton. He wants you to walk away from it not really having a takeaway. There is no like thought
It's like,
provoking.
am I happier that he married the living woman, or should I have wanted him to marry the corpse bride? Yes,
the entire
says Tim Burton.
question of the movie is can this relationship between a living person and a corpse work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the conclusion the movie comes to is no.
What? It's
but
like,
it really, really, really close to having been.
Right. It could
If
have.
she hadn't walked in the room, they would have done it.
Mm-hmm.
And there would have been a relationship between a dead and a dead person.
And if Emily hadn't, you know, had given into selfishness or hadn't, you know, had a change of heart and was like, no, I can't do this to you. She loves you. I'm dead. She's alive. You know.
Live your life for the people you can live for.
Yeah, we'll get into more of that later with the transcendental stuff, but yeah, and yeah, because it does sort of contrast it with like earlier in the movie, like the only experience of marriage Victor and Victoria had was their own parents who hated each other and had only married for convenience and arranged their marriage for entirely economical means.
Because they'll be destitute.
If they don't, I forget.
I guess that's gonna be our
We
episode.
gotta have that in the title.
If you don't
Oh,
listen-
there was a murder most foul.
Yeah.
That's what triggered my memory from last week's episode title.
Yep. Go
They'll
back
be
and listen to it.
destitute. Sounds like a great episode title to me.
Yeah. Yep.
Anyway, yeah, like I was saying, like it takes this very postmodern stance. Like I think it's very a typical experience for people growing up in this day and age to have parents whose marriages operated like that.
Mm-hmm.
Just like they were arranged by their parents and they just kind of learned to exist in each other's presence, and
Yeah.
they find something about that deeply dissatisfying,
Mm-hmm.
but they also have no clue how to do it themselves, like do it
Mhm.
better.
Which is where a lot of traditions and institutions from the past is where our generation is finding ourselves. Now, people hear postmodern thrown around a lot, but I guess just for the sake of this discussion here, what does postmodernism mean in like a very brief definition?
The way that I usually characterize it is like
because there's modernism and then there's postmodernism.
neither of modernity and modernism are very different things.
Ah.
Modernism is a specific Catholic heresy,
Okay, modernity and
which
then
we will
postmodernism.
maybe treat later.
Yeah.
But modern thought is characterized by how can we make things as like absolutely flawlessly logical as we possibly can.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the pursuit of being a purely rational creature.
Mm-hmm.
And people ran into the inevitability of humanity, like this
Yeah.
this je ne sais quoi that can't
Look
be
no-
explained
Look
in
no
pure
further than the second half of the 19th and the 20th centuries.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was all like the consequences of modern thought, rearing its ugly head in the worst possible way.
Mm-hmm. It started all hopeful, like, we're building skyscrapers and let's go to the moon. And 2 world wars and genocides and unethical science
Like the
practices.
bloodiest century in human history by a long shot.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically the whole thing was like, let's see how in what knots we can bend our brains. We aren't really even after the truth anymore.
Because what is truth really?
Well, they believed in truth. Like you couldn't have the modern way of thinking without there being truth.
Yeah, yeah.
But the thing was that, they were after was not truth. What they were after was like living life without emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And postmodernity has sort of realized the uselessness of living that way
Mm-hmm.
and rejects it, but also doesn't know where to go from
Yeah.
here.
Mhm.
And so it's like
Well,
just kind of
so it-
lost without having a purpose. And so it ends up being make of it whatever you want, or there is no purpose at all. Nothing means anything.
So
So
just try to feel as good as you can through any means necessary for the rest of your life.
I don't.
I mean,
It's not
some
like that
interpretations.
naive. Some variation thereof.
Mm-hmm.
Tim Burton kind of takes the former stance
Mhm.
in this, like, there's no objective meaning to this meaninglessness of living your life purely for, social standing and money and stuff.
There might not be a right way, but whatever it was, our
Whatever's
parents
wrong,
did.
I mean, we can clearly see this wrong way. Like,
Mhm.
Barkus is representing that. Here's this totally unworkable way of living.
Mhm.
And then what's workable now is, well, I guess you decide.
It's what you make of it. Yeah. Maybe you marry a dead person. Maybe you marry a perfectly normal living person.
And either of those options are kind of just the same.
Because marriage is flexible like that, apparently.
Mm-hmm. How does that conflict with our Catholic sensibilities?
Well,
Not necessarily like completely like
yeah, they're not like
butting heads, but it's sort of
not quite as
It's not
extremely.
opposed. It's
it
just
diverges.
there's some tension.
it diverges.
Some.
Well, because the problem with postmodernity is that it's also not really after truth anymore.
No,
In much the same way that modern thought wasn't after truth.
kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe all
Yeah.
the old things are bad. Let's try to make up something new that makes more sense to us.
Yeah, and so it's not acknowledging the existence of objective truth. There's a lot of, in our present culture, there's this acknowledgement of the human element of things, like
Mhm.
living as a purely rational being just doesn't work. But we also don't want to use this objective system that, a faith tradition like Catholicism provides,
Mm-hmm.
because that's just not what I really feel like doing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Because that asks something of me, and there's different strings attached to it there, and so forth. Ask me to submit myself to something outside of me versus me making of life what I will.
Yeah, pretty much.
So all that comes to bear in the Corpse Bride and
Not so much in the story, but more in like the attitude
In the
of
dynamics.
of the presentation of the themes and
right.
ideas.
mm-hmm. So yeah, those are some initial thoughts on issues with the Corpse Bride. Nothing that like ruins the movie, but it's
No.
just sort of
I mean, if you take it as just the story that it is,
Mm-hmm.
it's perfectly just fine. But it does make it difficult to cover on this kind of an analytical podcast when there's really
difficult. Well, I mean,
maybe not.
It's very different.
It's different from.
We
It's
tend
hard
to-
to like pin down the things that we usually pin down because it's actively trying not to.
but that's a good challenge for us because sometimes you have to be able to examine things that aren't necessarily your cup of tea, but
Right.
then that helps.
When we
'Cause
pick
there are-
our topics, we always go into it knowing what's good about it because we like it or we've seen it. Which is why I'd be interested in doing more requests and such, just to kind of get a broader, span of things.
And we're not always going to like things, and there may even be a salt cast here and there. However,
Which
it's
Should we do a James of the Giant Peach episode? Do a
that'd be
Saltcast on it?
Then I will go off on that movie. Maybe it's Lent, we could do that as like a penance or something for that.
But this is the
It's
last
almost
week
the end of
Lent.
Oh, you're right.
and
Next
also
Lent.
we're missing up an April 1st opportunity also with that.
Oh, yeah. Well, whatever. So yeah, I guess if we don't have any more comments on the
I guess we could talk about redeeming qualities, or do we just want to talk about redeeming qualities in
In the
trans-
form
the
of
transcendentals,
transcendentals?
yeah.
Sure. Let's do
because
that.
I mean, so yeah, there are things like even within postmodernism, like Riley said, like it's kind of like a broken clock can be right twice a day. So like one of Thomas Aquinas' things was like, always trying to find whatever nugget of truth is in somebody's system of thought and then try
Right.
to
If it
work
comes
from there.
from humans, right? There's some
If you're
human
earnestly
element.
seeking the truth, you will find something of it.
Right.
So yeah, with that being said, what is true in the Corpse Bride?
I would like to say that it conveys the fact that marrying a dead person as a living person just doesn't work, but it really tries not to. It tries its best not to, but it does communicate that in the end.
It does communicate that love is a choice to,
Right.
towards
Right.
another. It's very
It's-
other-centered.
Right. It's not about, the status it might bring you and your family or the convenience of it. It's
sort of
about being able to give yourself to another person.
It's sort of the postmodern answer to the utilitarian, almost puritanical approach to marriage. That Victorian
Victorian era?
I can't talk today. Victorian era stodginess and sterility. With a more fluid approach, but it does land on the truth. Yeah, like we said, love is a choice to, will the good of another.
Right, because Emily in the end makes the choice to say, no, I'm not what's best for you. Mm-hmm. You living your life with her and not committing freaking suicide right here.
Yeah. Well, then even though initially Victor and Victoria's marriage is arranged, they choose to love each other, unlike their
At the
parents who
end of
did
it,
not
yeah.
love each other whatsoever, and form a more perfect union than their parents had.
Because the first two marriages Victor found himself getting into were very involuntary.
Mm-hmm.
But by the end, he does make that choice. And
Yeah.
it's accepted. It's cool. So that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Or
And there's some
true thing, I should say. Good
Yeah.
isn't here yet.
Yes. So, any other things we should say about truth in this movie?
I don't know if it super precisely fits under truth, but this something I would like to point out is that it's almost better to be dead than to live the way that the parents in this movie lived, because through the way that it's all colorized and characterized in the atmosphere of the living versus the dead realms, it's so much more lively and colorful and exciting.
It's
where the dead people are
Mm-hmm.
than where the living people are. And
like
it embodies this attitude maybe it's better to be dead than to be living life the way I am now, which in a certain way is true and in a certain way isn't.
Right.
So
Right. Because it's almost like the people in the realm of the dead are more free to be whoever themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more expression, a lot more just kind of doing things because that's their character, even if their character is being a headless waiter.
The living world is very subdued, I think would be the right word for it. They are kind of suppressing.
yeah, suppressed is a better word.
Suppressed and depressed. Write that down. TM.
Suppressed and depressed and destitute.
DeStiTUTE. That's what I got out of the movie.
DeStiTUTE.
Yeah. Having your kids marry other people just for their dowry money for you. So that's not, selfish at all. Goodness. What is good in this movie? I think the bit where Emily, kind of battles with her own desire for love and ultimately rejects selfishness and gives up victory. Victor. I can't talk today. Victor. And she chooses to let him go and finds peace in that.
Right, because it seemed like the thing attaching her to, the underworld corporeal realm was this desire for her lost love that didn't show up, but
Turns
actually
out
kind of did because he killed
the
her.
guy who killed her, yeah.
But she felt like she needed to be married to be happy, to find happiness. But then at the end, she kind of let go of that, which allowed her to pass on, which
Through
is
an
the
act of
third.
love.
She
thought she wanted to be married, but it turns out she just wanted to love and be loved.
which that happened. And
And that those things are necessarily correlated, but
They're not mutually exclusive by
they
any
aren't
stretch.
mutually exclusive.
but they're
Right,
not
because her act of love for Victor was letting him go to live his life with his actual living wife and not his dead goth GF.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, there was that. Victor also, I mean, for all of his blundering, is very attentive to Emily, and he has sort of compassion on her about midway through the movie, like
and awareness of how she's feeling, and
Mm-hmm.
is respectful of it, and works his way in to try to make her feel better. And,
He's a very sensitive guy in general,
yeah,
and which is very much against what his parents want him to be. They want him to be this stiff upper lip, live, keep calm.
he
and carry
gains
on kind of
agency
guy.
over the course of the movie.
Right. But like even at the beginning when he's like kind of allowing his heart to open up on the piano for Victoria, he's just kind of the sensitive guy that hasn't been allowed to express himself or make any decisions or take any agency.
Himself known to another and to be known.
Right.
So
So
and then he tries to be able to do that with Emily,
for her
but
sake,
then there's sort of an element of like complementarity there. It's not just one person choosing to love the other person and they have to accept it. It's like a back and forth, she realizes that it's not what is best for him to marry Emily, So there's some good stuff in there. Beauty. Now, I think
this is like the first time our podcast is going to be divided on something. 'Cause
Yeah.
I actually really like the aesthetic.
Yeah.
it's just fine.
it's not. I'm not going to knock it as bad. It's just not very much not for me.
Now, the quality of the animation is undeniable.
The animation and music and the voice acting were pretty spot on, I must admit. Being a fan of stop motion myself, I will give it that.
Like particularly when they're playing piano and how that was rather accurately timed and placed and such.
And they were like actually playing chords when they were playing chords. Like
Attention to detail is like one of my favorite. I am a detail hawk in movies, and stop motion movies are often so full of like deliberate details and
When you're
different
moving
things.
every individual thing on every individual frame, everything you move has to
Things
be deliberate.
that physically exist in space.
Right. So it's like everything about that is just you get a greater sense of how like much attention the director and set designers and animators had to pay,
So I give it respect for that. I respect this movie. I don't necessarily enjoy it.
Which there you go. So that's the bare minimum we ask.
Yeah.
But I also think that creatively the color palette does a good job in
The
helping
storytelling
with the
through color is very good. Yes.
The very drab grays and blues of the overworld and the weird, funky, vibrant,
Fantastical.
underworld colors.
Mm-hmm. Somehow actual skeletons are more look happier than living people.
Well, they don't have lips to frown. So
True.
and the music's also pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The individual musical numbers were
It's very spooky, scary skeletons.
well in the underworld particularly.
Lots of xylophones.
skeletal jazz.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the skeletal jazz.
That was a fun sequence. Well animated, good music. Well
There was a trombone.
Dutes were had by all.
That's a kneecap slapper. Do you find this humorous or not?
Anyway, Unity.
Spook.
What ties this movie together?
Spook.
Yeah.
Spook.
I guess the themes, are what really tie everything together.
Yeah.
Right, like the
I mean,
For
as
instance,
in any movie, but
Right.
this movie in particular does have themes that carry through.
in all senses of the other things, like we just mentioned the color palette. This is like the fourth time we talked about it, but it's like that is a unifying factor of like.
It's a means by which the
and
film
visuals.
communicates something without having to tell you directly about it.
And I like it when films can be subtle about their storytelling, when they can not feel the need to over-explain things and just have...
Show don't tell when it's done right is excellent.
Right.
So yes, because it turns out human beings are excellent at picking things up without being directly told about them. I mean, sometimes you do need to be told about things, but...
It depends.
Mom, can I have pattern recognition?
We have pattern recognition at home.
No, this is the soup time version.
Oh!
Mom, can I have pattern recognition for avoiding predators? Yes. Actually, seeing Among Us figures in everything time.
Okay.
So for those of you among us who are fans, thanks for listening to the Palladium Papists. You can listen to us on Spotify, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and someday, if we get it fixed, Apple Podcasts.
I may have found a way to trick Apple into doing it. It's just, the new episodes are up as of this week. So
Sweet. So
whether they will continue to be uploaded, I have my doubts.
So stay tuned. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, at Pallet Papists. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, or suggestions for future episodes, email us at palladianpapists@gmail.com. And we do like these suggestions. Like this, it was a good, I feel like...
This is a very different episode, but a
This
very fun
kinda-
episode.
It's kind of refreshing. We all got to kind of discuss and debate more than we
We
usually
got to
do.
exercise our think muscles in a little different way today. So
Right, if you have complaints or suggestions, please provide them through official means. Don't just complain in our Facebook group chat.
I mean, you could do that too.
You can do that too.
But if you want us to do it,
I
you
have
don't want us
faith.
to do anything about
I
it.
have faith in your suggestions. So I guess we will catch you all next week. Have a happy Easter. Well, you already will have. Well, it'll be the Easter season when this comes out.
So have a
so,
happy
he will
rest
have
of
risen.
Easter season.
yes, indeed. So
So I guess. Oh wait, when this comes out, he will have risen. So we're not spending. We're
it's-
spending a day in the.
he's
This is more like a holy
eternally
Saturday.
risen. So timey-wimey,
It's like-
wibbly wobbly stuff. But
Right. It's just this. The timing for this episode is a little weird, being about dead people.
Oh yeah,
Anyway,
should have had it go out on Holy Saturday. Anyway, goodbye.
bye.
Peace.